Okay, welcome in. The first round of the NFL draft has been completed. I'm going to go through all the picks. The Tennessee Titans finished with the number 1 pick. They would draft Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. The Jacksonville Jaguars traded with the Cleveland Browns for the 2nd pick. They would draft Travis Hunter, the cornerback out of Colorado. The New York Giants finished with the 3rd pick. They would draft Abdul Carter, an edge rusher out of Penn State. The New England Patriots finished with the 4th overall pick. They would draft Will Campbell, an offensive tackle out of LSU. Due to the fact that the Cleveland switched 2 to 5, they were the 5th overall pick. They would draft Mason Graham, a defensive tackle out of Michigan. The Las Vegas Raiders have drafted Ashton Jeanty, a running back out of Boise State. The New York Jets have drafted Armand Membo, an offensive tackle out of Mizzou. Carolina Panthers have drafted Tetera McMillan, a wide receiver out of Arizona. The 9th pick went to the New Orleans Saints. They've drafted Calvin Blanks Jr., an offensive tackle out of Texas. Rounding out the top 10, the Chicago Bears drafted Colston Loveland, a tight end out of Michigan. Take a look at the next 20 draft picks to the top of the screen. San Francisco drafted Michael Williams, an edge rusher out of Georgia. The Dallas Cowboys drafted Tyler Booker, an offensive guard out of Alabama. The Miami Dolphins drafted Kenneth Grant, a defensive tackle out of Michigan. The Indianapolis Colts were 14th overall. They would draft tight end Tyler Warren out of Penn State. The Atlanta Falcons had the 15th overall pick. They would draft Jalen Walker, a linebacker out of Georgia. The 16th overall pick would go to Walter Nolan, a defensive tackle out of Mississippi. The Cincinnati Bengals drafted 17th overall. They would draft Shamar Stewart, an edge rusher out of Texas A&M. The Seattle Seahawks drafted guard Greg Zabel out of North Dakota State. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted Emeka Egbuka, a wide receiver out of Ohio State. Now, the 20th overall pick would go to the Denver Broncos, and I was messaging a friend of mine, and I said, he asked me, what would I like to see the Broncos do? Who would I like to see them draft? My first pick was a wide receiver, and my second pick was a cornerback. Now, I know running back was a pretty popular one because we obviously need a running back, but I feel like we have a pretty decent backfield as it is. So I called it cornerback Jahdae Barron out of Texas. So I'm sure he'll give Riley Moss a run for his money, but if we can have 2 elite corners on the defense, then there's no stopping this D. All right, the next 10 picks. The Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Derek Harmon, a defensive tackle out of Oregon. The Los Angeles Chargers would draft Omarion Hampton, a running back out of North Carolina. The Green Bay Packers, for the first time since 2002, drafted a wide receiver / running back in the first round, Matthew Golden out of Texas. The Minnesota Vikings finished with the 24th overall pick, drafting Donovan Jackson, an offensive guard out of Ohio State. The New York Giants would trade with Houston to get the 25th overall pick. They would draft quarterback Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. The Atlanta Falcons traded with the Los Angeles Rams for the 26th overall pick. So they had 2 first-round picks, as well as the Giants. The Falcons would draft edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. The Baltimore Ravens finished with the 27th pick. They would draft Malaki Starks, a safety out of Georgia. The Detroit Lions would draft defensive tackle Taliek Williams out of Ohio State. The Washington Commanders would finish with the 29th overall pick. They would draft Josh Connolly Jr., an offensive tackle out of Oregon. The Buffalo Bills would draft Maxwell Hairston, a cornerback out of Kentucky. And the last 2 picks, Philly and Kansas City actually flipped picks. Philly would draft 31st overall, and they would draft linebacker Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. And to round out the first round of the National Football League draft for 2025, the Kansas City Chiefs would select offensive tackle Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. So once this second day is done, I'll be reviewing those picks as well, and I'll try my best to do the rest of the draft picks for the National Football League. How do you guys feel about the draft picks for the teams that you cheer for? Again, I'm so pumped about a cornerback for the Denver Broncos. I'm a huge Broncos fan, obviously. There's no question about it. I personally can't wait to see the training and preseason, and we'll see how they do with the upcoming season. All right, as always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and appreciative at the same time. Until next time, and as always, take care.